Hi everyone, welcome to Season 2 of A Likely Story. It's great to have you back with us. I'm your host, Grafton Stringer. A Likely Story, as I might remind you, is a homemade program where we bring you stories about life, politics, and current events, all done from a Florida perspective, although sometimes we just do it sober. Now, it seems like when we had our last episode, the Republican and Democratic conventions had just wrapped up. And if you were waiting for the presidential race to settle into something more closely resembling sanity, well, you can just keep on waiting. Donald Trump has continued to be Donald Trump, and by that, of course, I mean a spoiled, racist, misogynistic mass of quivering man-child that continues to experience one meltdown after another. So much so, in fact, that Time magazine featured Trump on their cover a few weeks back with this image. Now, as trendy as I'm sure the editors of the magazine thought it was at the time, it ignores the fact that since the beginning of his candidacy, Donald Trump came pre-melted. The day he announced, he started by saying Mexicans are criminals, drug dealers, and rapists. And that was just on day one. Now, Hillary Clinton has been continually and openly called a liar for her handling of emails during her time as Secretary of State, a claim that's been exhaustively investigated by the FBI and hyper-partisan congressional members who haven't found a single broken law. She has repeatedly apologized for her own carelessness in the incident, but that's never going to be good enough to satisfy the bloodlust of the super sleuths and conspiracy theorists, the hysterical AM radio addicts who know more than the FBI and a bunch of congressional hatchet men, and insist that this 68-year-old candidate, who has devoted her entire career to public service and charity work, belongs in federal prison. Meanwhile, here we are now, a little more than a year after Donald Trump made his announcement, and by now we all know not only about his slurs towards Mexican Latinos, but also a few other indiscretions, like his insults towards women, his insults towards African Americans, towards Muslims and refugees, his insults towards Gold Star military families. He's openly made fun of disabled people, insulted war heroes and generals. He refuses to denounce violence at his rallies. He continues his promotion of racist birther conspiracies. He's being investigated for fraud at Trump University, his allegedly illegal activities at the Trump Foundation charity, his refusal to pay employees and private contractors like you and me for work that they've already completed. We all know about his refusal to release his tax returns, his pleas to foreign hackers to intervene in the presidential election for his benefit, his admiration of Vladimir Putin and other authoritarian thugs, his promotion for the expansion of worldwide nuclear weapons, his ideas on punishing women who have abortions, his lack of an even basic knowledge about world events, his lack of preparation for his first debate as though it didn't even matter, his inability to admit that any of this even ever happened, although it's all been documented, his lack of basic human compassion, his lack of basic human decency, and his apparent inability to buy himself a mirror. That's right, Republicans, this is the candidate you made, elected, and now continue to support. In fact, Trump, in just his first year of candidacy, has said so many horrible, offensive things, he had to outsource some of that work too. And if somehow you managed to be not one of the ones who was included in that list, you pretty much have to figure that you're going to be next. And then in an attempt to prove that Donald Trump is really a serious candidate and a tolerant guy, in his first official act as candidate, he chose Indiana Governor Mike Pence as his running mate. Now, this is the same Governor Pence who tried to make it a jailable felony for same-sex couples to even apply for a marriage license. He wanted to defund Planned Parenthood, ban Syrian refugees from entering Indiana, and promote the mass deportation of undocumented immigrants, even those who might happen to be in the hospital. You know, just like Jesus would do. Our staff here at ALS even found an actual photo of Governor Pence throwing a gay man and an immigrant out of Indiana while still finding time to crush a filthy stray dog with his massive manly Christian thighs. Then, after the recent allegations of Donald Trump's disgusting and degrading comments about his celebrity status, entitling him to grab women's genitalia without their consent, you might think that there was going to be a change in his campaign, because if he did that to your mother, your sister, or your daughter, you would want to put him and his tiny Chester the molester hands in jail, wouldn't you? So I'm sure we'll see a humbler, more apologetic Trump in the second presidential debate, right? Well, not even close. He lumbered around like Lenny from Of Mice and Men, tossing meaningless word salads and blaming everyone else for his sexually criminal behavior. His version of an apology was to point at other people and say, well, he did it too. And you know who thinks ratting out someone else lets them off the hook? Criminals and 4-year-olds. But what's scariest to me is that I'm really beginning to think that Donald Trump is actually right about something. He really could stand out on Fifth Avenue and shoot someone in the face and not lose any votes. And I think it's way past time that we talk about what that says about the people who are supporting him. You know, the Founding Fathers made democracy a slow, deliberative, difficult process for a reason. To protect us against demagogues like Donald Trump and mob rule like you see at his rallies. Yes, they gave us an annoying number of checks and balances on purpose, so that it takes time for things to change, and that we avoid stupid decisions by people who are fundamentally unworthy of office. Starting to ring any bells? It also keeps Crazy Town 3 a.m. Twitter wars from turning into real wars. But that same system requires and demands cooperation and compromise between people who fundamentally politically disagree. But if you don't have the patience for our system of government, well, maybe we can interest you in a nice third world dictatorship somewhere. And I bet I already know somebody who's up for the job of ruling you. Now, if you plan to vote for Trump because you think he's a rich outsider beholden to no one, and there's too much money in politics, well, I agree, and that's a discussion worth having. But if you think our elected officials are bought and paid for, you can't seriously believe for 1 second the solution is to make a president out of the douchebag who's been bragging about doing all the buying. Now, if you're a factory worker or a coal miner and you feel left behind by the new economic realities, I agree and I understand. And I say that we need to do much, much more to help you weather the storm and retrain for new jobs. And it just might be a job that won't make your insides look like an 80-year-old barbecue grill. But I bet if you take a really close look at who's been opposing stimulus spending for new infrastructure projects and job training that would help put you back to work, I'm guessing you'll find it's mostly the guys that you're already voting for. And trying to say Hillary Clinton is responsible for the, quote, war on coal is like blaming high-speed internet for the war on Morse code. The world is moving on whether we like it or not. But that's what this and most elections are all about to you, isn't it? Turning back the clock. Back on women's rights, turning it back on rights for same-sex couples, and I bet if you could, civil rights. If only our best Republican scientists could only build a time machine. Oh, that's right, you don't believe in science. Donald Trump says global climate change is a Chinese hoax, and Mike Pence seriously says smoking doesn't actually kill people, because the jury is still out on smoking. Hell, just ask any firefighter how good smoke is for you. And if you're voting for Trump because you really think immigrants, African Americans, and Muslims are what's wrong with this country, then shame on you. And shame on you for screaming like a 3-year-old who lost his little red wagon about taking your country back, because America doesn't belong to you. It belongs to all of us. And taking it back just from whom? Everyone. Everyone is for keeping the border safe and secure. But, you know, they already keep track of immigration patterns, and for more than half a decade, more Americans have moved to Mexico than undocumented Mexicans have come into this country. So net immigration into America from Mexico is 0. Studies also show that immigrants are far less likely to commit a crime in their communities than their American-born counterparts. But all of this information is super, super hard to find because they only publish it everywhere. Now, Donald Trump says African Americans are living in hell. Based on what? Verifiable, easily located data shows overall crime rates across the country are down. Is he basing it on the evening news? Because based on the evening news, apparently we're all living in hell. He says he's the law and order candidate, and we have to respect cops in this country because we as Americans aren't capable of having 2 thoughts in our heads at the same time. He apparently believes we can't respect the police and still have the audacity to demand that the bad ones stop shooting black people who haven't done anything wrong. And shame on you for supporting a man who's tried for years to delegitimize the first African-American president of the United States with his birther racist bullshit and then lie about having done it over and over again. Like recording devices, TV, radio, and social media haven't been invented yet, and like none of us are keeping track. Shame on you for supporting someone who has carried out a one-man war on women, calling them fat, rating them for their attractiveness, calling them pigs, and now saying his remarks about grabbing them by the crotch was just locker room banter. Donald Trump looks like he's never done anything in his life even remotely strenuous enough to need a locker room. He looks more like the guy who runs around telling management about people he doesn't think look like they belong at the club. Besides, real men never talk about women like that. They treat them with dignity and respect. But Donald Trump isn't really a man at all now, is he? He's a spoiled child who only has the time and tolerance for people who kiss his rich, fat, white ass. And shame on you for supporting a man that tries to get votes by scaring the shit out of more people than Stephen King. He would have you believe that every day you're a few minutes away from a radical Muslim-inspired terror attack. And while the terrorist attacks in this country and around the world have been horrible and tragic and demand justice, I don't remember anyone in the 90s looking at the Atlanta Olympics, Oklahoma City, and the Unabomber and saying, you know what, we should round up all of the white guys named Eric, Tim, and Ted. The fact is, the overwhelming majority of Muslims are peace-loving people who just want the same thing your immigrant relatives wanted, a better life for their families. And in America, you are more likely to die from drowning in a bathtub, being shot by a toddler, or being struck by lightning than being killed by a terrorist. And that includes here in Florida, where we use lightning to reheat our leftovers. And in the interest of full disclosure, Hillary Clinton was far from my first choice to be president in 2016. But because I have a conscience, Donald Trump is my last. You know, I started a likely story a few months ago to be a lighthearted and hopefully funny webcast talking about current events and the incredibly screwed up things that go on here in Florida. We even film it here at home in the corner of the dining room. But the truth is, I'm running out of things that I think are even remotely funny about Donald Trump. I say if you want real positive change in this country, let's work together for campaign finance reform, lobbying reform, reversing Citizens United, and other measures that help get the money out of politics and bring real accountability to our elected officials. But I also say our country is already great because we never stop working to be better and to make it better, not because we blame other races, religions, and nationalities for our problems. But if you resort for whatever reason to voting for this blatantly racist, soulless child, this sad, broken beta version of an alpha male, then shame on you, because he betrays everything our country and our Constitution stands for. And sure, you can sit back and call me elitist and a snob and say, oh, you Hillary voters think you're so much smarter than us. Well, if you really support his intolerance, his fear-mongering and violence and still vote for this screaming bag of crazy, at this moment, yeah, you're goddamn right I do. And that's a likely story. I'm Grafton Stringer. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We hope to see you again next time.